it enables that and provides that. If you look at the key outcome of some of the digital technologies, not all, but some, obviously a lot of it is about gaining customers. So that's certainly one of the drivers that I've seen in my career to date with other organizations. And they're looking at improving customer loyalty. So what we're talking about there is the stickability of your clients. So what can you do to have them work with you in this increasingly transactional world that we live in? And of course, there's the information, because that's what we're talking about, data really. So it's about improving the ease of access to information to speed decisions, because the pace of change and the pace of business is so much faster today. It's a lot more agile. And so digitization programs can certainly help with that to help your organization become more agile, more faster to respond to your customers, to market influencers. So let's start to explore some of the technologies and trends that will drive change. Now, I'm throwing you in the deep end here, and there's a reason for that. So we're going to start off by talking about technology called blockchain. So let's just explore what blockchain is. Now, the first thing I'd say is that for once, a technology is actually called what it is. So it is literally a chain of blocks, if you like. It's also called distributed ledger. So you might hear that phrase being used in different publications or different webinars if you're attending those as well. So let's just rip into what it is, shall we? So basically, if you think about a traditional IT infrastructure, you normally have a database or a data warehouse, and that provides one source of information. So there's a problem with that, which has risen with the impact of cybercrime, with the rise of corruption, and simply with the pure problem of poor data, bad data being entered into systems. So what blockchain actually is, as the name suggests, it's a series or a chain of different blocks which are all databases. So think of it as a group of databases which are all linked with one another and have the same information. So that's the basic architecture. Now, the key thing about this is that all parties need to accept a change in the data. So what that does is it enables the impact of cybercrime to be very much lessened, because the data is very much verified. Let me give you an example. I've been hacked, and it's a horrible thing. One of the things I've had to do now is I go to two-factor authentication. So for those of you that might have used two-factor authentication, basically if I go and log on from a different Wi-Fi to my Gmail, Google will call me or send me a text going, hey, this is really you, we want to verify that it's you. Now, the opportunity for a hacker to be there at that time and be on my phone and grabbing that verification code at exactly that moment is virtually impossible. So now if you imagine the ability of a blockchain platform to have the same information in 5, 10, 15 different blocks, it becomes very, very hard for a hacker or for cybercrime to influence or affect that. But look, blockchain is not about just that. But just before I get into some of that impact, I'll just finish off what it is. It's controlled by keys. So in the same way as you used to have a safe and you use a key to access the safe, think of this as being a digital database where you access it through keys. Now, here's some interesting applications of blockchain. And if you think about blockchain being a platform, a technology, you can layer applications on top of this platform. So here's one of the interesting things. Now, the Government Office for Science has recently released a white paper on blockchain. That's kind of an odd thing, isn't it? Because you think that governments are the least likely to embrace new technologies. And yet here they are writing a paper on blockchain. So I'm just going to read out to you the opening sentences from this white paper, because I think it's really relevant so you can understand the way that the UK government is viewing blockchain and the sort of transformational effect that it can have. The progress of mankind is marked by the rise of new technologies and the human ingenuity they unlock. In distributed ledger technology, we may be witnessing one of those potential explosions of creative potential that catalyze exceptional levels of innovation. The technology could prove to have the capacity to deliver a new kind of trust, keyword there, trust, to a wide range of services. As we've seen open data revolutionize the citizen's relationship with the state, so may the visibility in these technologies reform our financial markets, supply chains, consumer and business-to-business services, and publicly held registers. Wow, yeah, that's a heck of a statement, isn't it? Now, the interesting thing about the government use of blockchain is that the Estonian government, who's one of the 5 governments around the world, of which New Zealand's one, which is pretty cool, are a member of this group called D5, so they're quite a digitized government. They've already got blockchain solutions in place. Now, what they're finding is that now they've got a blockchain solution, the citizens are now trusting that their data is unable to be corrupted and is verifiable, and they're all starting to build a whole lot of e-government services on top of this blockchain platform. Quick snapshot of history, quite relevant, and we'll explore why in a minute. So blockchain was originally invented back in 2008 was when it came out for the cryptocurrency market. I won't get into why, because that's a whole webinar on its own, but basically that's where it's come from. Now, the interesting thing about that is if you think about technologies, say like GPS. GPS was originally developed for the American military, so they knew where their soldiers were, special ops soldiers and things like that. Now you get it in your watch, you get it in your car, you get it on your phones. It's become commonplace and it's all around us. And so too, I think that we'll see the impact of blockchain. So let's explore a little bit about why or how this will potentially impact the wills and probate industry. Now, the first thing I'd say here is that there's a lot of what if and maybe in this. So nobody really knows how blockchain technology is going to impact the wills and probate industry or different industries. But what we can see is the possibilities. So what I'm going to explore here is some of the potential possibilities so that you can understand some of the transformational or disruptive effects that a technology like blockchain can bring in. So what if blockchain, through its ability to have verifiable data with the blocks, the groups of databases held by beneficiaries, removed any challenges to wills? I think that's possible. I think that, in fact, when you look at what the blockchain technology does, that is likely, because we can start to look at layering a smart contract, which can be a will, on top of a blockchain platform. What about if there was a living, breathing will? So if we imagine a user journey, and they might be, say, 22 and they get a will, and then they might get married and they'll update their will, they'll have kids, they'll update their will again perhaps at that point. The problem with that, of course, is that they might not. They might get divorced and they might not. And we've all been there in the industry and seen the impact of that. Now, what if somebody were to come through and say, hey, actually on blockchain, we can create a will which is linked to all of these public bits of information. So in other words, we know that if the government's going to run with a blockchain solution, that somebody's bought a house, that somebody's passed away, that somebody's had kids, that somebody's married, all of these different things. And that then flows through to a will, which naturally then updates itself and again goes through to perhaps all of the beneficiaries of that will. Now, if we think about the industry and how it works, obviously if somebody has a will and then they pass on, When they pass on, they go through probate and execution. And if you think about that from a global standpoint, how much money globally is actually tied up in probate and intestacy as well, of course, but in probate and execution for a period of time, it's really, really significant. So the economic impact of that globally could be quite significant. What if there was an end-to-end blockchain solution which then flowed through effortlessly on the basis of the will all the way through to probate and execution and brought down that sort of time. Now, to the best of my knowledge, these things don't exist just now, but I can absolutely assure you that they are topics of conversation within this business. What I would say is that right now there exists some technologies, and look, I'm not advocating them, I'm just saying that they exist, which are the asset vaults, the digital vaults, where they're based on blockchain and they enable personal ownership of all of the digital assets. And we probably read some of the problems that exist around people having Facebook accounts and Instagram accounts and all of these sorts of things which are difficult when they pass on. So if you had the veracity of data problem resolved and you had a blockchain solution in place, and this does exist, then perhaps all of that problem starts to dissipate. So I include that option because this is the start. This is something that is out there now and is happening. So that's blockchain. Now, as I say, I could do a whole webinar on blockchain, but we've only got an hour, so I need to move on. Let's move on to the next technology. Now, API integration. API stands for Application Program Interface. Now, this has been around for a while, and a lot of you may be familiar with it, but some of you may not be, because if I look at the legal sector, if I look at the Wills and Probate industry in terms of will writers, legal services, I don't see a lot of it. And part of that is because the software itself is not architected to be API enabled. So what API integration basically does, it enables the seamless sharing of data inside your organization and externally as well. So basically an organization would release an API and other organizations would then go and develop their programs to integrate with the original piece of software. So there's a whole lot of examples of that, which I'm going to come to in a little bit, but really when you look at the impact of that within a business, you can find as a user, if you're sitting there, one source of the truth. So you can gather your data on your customers from all sorts of different programs, and you may have an API in with a data and analytics package. For example, you may then use that to enable better business decisions, or it might just be faster. It might just be more efficient because if you're a large organization or even a small one, the things that you do repetitively can impact on your time. So if you're spending time clicking between different programs, you've got different versions of the truth and different systems are not talking to each other, all of that can impact on your organization. And obviously also that then slows you down, which then impacts on the customer experience out the other end. And one of the great things about APIs, if you look at what's happened around the technology, the organizations that have got an API architecture tend to have developed ecosystems. So they've got access to, it gives you access rather to really specialized systems in that ecosystem. So what I mean by that is that, and look, here's Apple. Apple's a great example, right? So Steve Jobs really knew that he couldn't deliver everything that he needed to deliver that was possible to do on a phone. So what he did was he enabled the whole app framework so that he got people who were specialist games providers and weather and all this sort of stuff, and you just see how big that industry is. So think about that in a little microcosm here within the Wills and Probate industry. What we're talking about is the ability to get the best of breed, the specialized software which you can then use rather than making any compromises. But if you think about it in a positive sense, it's about giving you the best possible outcomes, making sure you've got the maximum capability that you can get. So really, to wrap that up, it's all systems working together which are linked with minimal compromises. So you're not talking about sort of a generic system which has a few bells and whistles but doesn't really solve your business problems. So that's API, and look, that's certainly one I think which is an easier stepping point for you. Now, the third, and again another chunky technology which is going to make an impact to you, is probably best explained by a guy called Marvin Minsky. Now, Marvin was the leader, the creator of the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab. So you kind of think he knows what he's talking about. What he said was, artificial intelligence is the science of making machines do things that would require intelligence if done by men. So it's also called AI, and you might hear it called AI quite often. And look, a lot of you probably have heard of this. So let's just kind of cover off what it is. So what we're really talking about here is that it's machines which learn as they go. So you'll see bots on banking sites, and they're learning how to answer questions. They're assuming all sorts of different information. But look, there's all sorts of different forms of artificial intelligence. It's not all about, you know, Terminator movies and things like that. But, you know, when you think about it, it really has become incredibly commonplace. So in our home, we have Alexas. If you've been to, say, a major airport like a Dubai or something like that, you would have been in a driverless train, and that's all driven by artificial intelligence. One of the interesting things about the developments of artificial intelligence is the research piece came out not so long ago, which said that humans can't actually tell now when they're speaking to a robot. Now, if you don't believe me on that, what I ask you to do, don't do it now because I'll lose you, but Google Assistant, and look at the demonstration of the Google Assistant tool, because what you'll see there is the Google Assistant, which is artificial intelligence, it's a robot, making a hair appointment, and the person on the other end of the phone does not know that they're talking to a robot. And this is commonplace. We can buy it now. So we're starting to see more and more of this happening, and it's all around us. My belief is that all industries can be disrupted by artificial intelligence, and we're starting to see that happen. Now, we haven't started to see that in the Wills and Probate industry, but we are starting to see touches of it in the legal sector, and obviously for low-level tasks, it makes a lot of sense. So let's just explore what that would actually mean and what it would look like in the Wills and Probate industry. So we think about the disruptive impacts of something like artificial intelligence. Basically, what I think could happen here is that there's an opportunity, and it's a risk, of course, there's always an opportunity and a risk of industry disruption through automating advice for even complex wills. So you can imagine something online where complex wills are underpinned by artificial intelligence that learns as it goes, and perhaps that then goes on to providing trust advice based on parameters and information that the robot or the artificial intelligence may have picked up from doing, say, 10,000 wills or something like that. What about risk analysis in your business? So if you have, say, a will bank and you've got, let's pick a number, 10,000, and you're a relatively small practice, or even if you're a significant one, that is a big number of wills for you to get across, even with a good business process. So artificial intelligence then offers the ability for you to have that information scanned in the blink of an eye, and for it to highlight out of date or risky precedents, and to prompt you that those things need to be updated. And look, that brings about an opportunity, because you've got an opportunity through that scanning to perhaps start to build some workflows so that you can prioritize things like the complex high-value activities. You might have a client who has multiple businesses, perhaps they're a high net worth individual. Maybe AI can take care of the simplistic stuff, and they'll do that automatically and just tell you that it's being done. So there's all sorts of things that can be done by AI, perhaps, and this is a perhaps, because the information is available out in the public, it can take information, as I was referring to before, saying, hey, this person's had, they've got married, or they've got divorced, or they've had children, or they've had a substantial life event, they've been in an accident. They need to update their will. Now, at the moment, we're reliant on them telling us, or having very good business processes. Artificial intelligence, I believe, has an opportunity of delivering that to us. Now, focus is a really key word here, and it's very easy when we're talking about technology to forget about the key elements of what it's all about. And what it's really all about is maximizing the opportunity for you to spend time one-on-one, human to human, talking to people about where they're at to build that relationship. So the key thing around that is that you can then create yourself more time. You can invest and focus that time where it's going to give you maximum bang for buck, knowing that you've got recommendations and information which have been generated by solid, verifiable data from artificial intelligence. So that's 3 of the 4. Now, this is a bit of a spooky kind of part of the webinar. I had to throw it in. Really interesting artificial intelligence quote from Vladimir Putin. The nation that leads in AI will be the ruler of the world. That was just in September of last year. And the scary thing about that is, my personal opinion is that he's probably right. And we can already start to see the influence of things like artificial intelligence potentially in the Brexit referendum and potentially in the American elections. So all of that was based in and around artificial intelligence and the use of bots. Not quite sure why he's winking there, and if his picture looks slightly fuzzy, perhaps he's been to one of his chemical factories. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, we move on. The last technology I want to explore is online wills. And you might say, why is online wills in this when we've just been talking about blockchain, artificial intelligence? And I'll tell you why. Because it gives you the lowest cost, maximum bang for buck opportunity in digitization. That's why. Now, the other reason is that the growth in this non-advised self-help wills area is really going to be substantial. And part of that is driven by the key millennial demographic, which want to go and do research online. They want to buy online. They've got a different set of needs, and they're aged between 22 and 35. Now, here's the thing, right? We've got the most wealthy generation, the one that we're in now, about to pass wealth to this generation, the millennial generation. So these are the people who are about to inherit the riches of the world, more so than any other time in human history. So a really important demographic, I would have thought, to focus on. Now, incidentally, just a little bit of a plug, we're going to be running the next webinar on exactly this, the buying habits of different demographics. So we can give you some details of that a little bit later on. So back to online wills. I think the key thing, and again, this is a human to human component. This gives you an opportunity to acquire customers through an online presence, through starting your digitization. But it's not just about a transactional relationship. It's about going on from there and having a lifetime personal advice relationship, which really, when you think about it, it's bizarre, isn't it? Because you're starting that through a highly transactional online process, but that in fact is the opportunity that we've got with online wills. Right, now we have to get another guy with a beard in there. So this is Steve Jobs. Now the interesting thing about Steve Jobs, other than the fact that he was super smart, is that he leads, or led rather, the biggest technology company in the world, certainly the most lucrative, the richest. Now, despite all that, he has this quote here: you've got to start with the customer experience and work back towards the technology, not the other way around. So what can we take from a mastermind like Steve Jobs? So strategy number 1 really is about starting from customer experience. So to do that, you really need to understand who your target customers are. So who are you looking for? Who do you currently have as customers? What problems do they have? Because they'll be different for different sorts of customers. older customers will need different things to younger customers. So understanding what they need and thinking about that, looking at it through that lens when you start to consider digitisation. How do they want to buy? So millennials will probably, in fact, highly likely want to buy on a different basis to those people who are over 60. Right, hopefully that helps with strategy number one. Let's get into strategy number two if you're starting your digitisation journey. So this is, again, an internal strategy. So really got to start taking a very honest look at your organisation. So when you look at who you are, you've got to have a look at whether you're proactive or you're a reactive organisation. So either is fine. It really is, I think, just taking an honest look and saying, yes, as an assessment, this is who I am. Now, the next part of that is how do you make decisions? And I know that there's some solicitors who are in the webinar today. Making a decision within a law firm is an entirely different experience to making a decision in a will writing firm or an accountancy practice. So understanding that, understanding the cultural landscape of your firm and mapping that out, I think will really help you with your digitisation journey. Do you have a culture of innovation? Do you foster that within your people? Be honest again with that, because if you don't, you're going to need to address that issue up front. And do you have the capabilities? Do you know how to get started with this? Do you have the smarts, or do you need to buy them in? Do you need to appoint somebody who can do this for you? And realistically, what are the barriers to success that you're going to confront? You need to think about who's going to lead the process, and you do need an evangelist because there will be the disbelievers. So you're going to need somebody who's going to keep things happening and driving on. Otherwise, we all know what's going to happen. It's just going to end up in a committee, and it's going to take 5 times as long, or just be strangled to death and not happen. So you need to get somebody to lead that process. And again, it's kind of a subset of the proactive, reactive thing, or culture of innovation. But just have a think about it in a different sense. Are you an innovator, or are you a second adapter? And you know what, with artificial intelligence and some of these things, my suggestion is that you could well sit back and wait to be a second adapter to see where it is. But obviously the risk you carry there is that somebody else comes in with a whole lot of money and disrupts the industry. But it really depends on where you're at for your firm and what's right for you. And obviously the money question's got to be there, right? So understand your level of investment and the time that you've got to put into it, and what your ROI is going to be. Now, your ROI should really be about your own matrix for your own business. So every business will want different things. I mean, there's some drivers that we talked about before, but you'll have different drivers. You might be more about efficiency. You might be less about customer acquisition. So just be clear about what it is that you're looking to achieve with your digitisation journey. So this is really logical, right? But actually it's just not. Strategy number 3 is about where do you start? So you need to, as Mao Zedong said, a journey starts with a single step. Absolutely right. Who am I to argue with that? So I think if you sat back and looked at the stage that your firm is at, perhaps you need to sit back and look at where you're at personally with your own digital journey, then that will give you a really good, honest assessment. Now, to help you with that, maybe these categories could help you. So if we look at disbelievers, pretty obvious. Some of you might be on the webinars today. Hopefully I'm happy to persuade you. Explorer, are you starting to look and consider these sorts of things? And look, the survey we did up front kind of said that most of the people on the webinar today were explorers. Are you a player? Are you actually doing some stuff in digital, but you're not in a sort of a fully mature model yet? Transformation, are you actually like transforming the inside of your organization, or are you actually a disruptor? So you're outside the organization, you're really starting to shake up the industry, winning market share because you're just further ahead of everybody else. Now, here's the thing with getting started, is to be honest again, and you've really got to establish whether you're committed to this. But I say that because you can start small, and we can talk about that in a minute. But one of the suggestions I have for you is that you can just get started really easily, because these days you don't have to go and spend tens of thousands of pounds investing in technology. Cloud and cloud computing, that is, and SaaS businesses, which is software as a service business, which is what Arken is and other providers are, really mean that all you got to do is lease the software. So there's no capex. So the barrier to entry then is very much lowered. You just need to perhaps manage that transition into a SaaS world and talk with your partners about that. But it's certainly, from an online presence perspective, a lot easier than going and building that all yourself. So let's just run a quick poll. Now, this is really about where you're at, honestly. So are you a disbeliever? Are you an explorer, a player, a transformer, or a disruptor? Let's just see what the results to that are. Okay, fantastic. So what we've got there is overwhelmingly people saying that they are explorers, which I guess is why you're here today, which is fantastic. And then there's some people who are players and transformers, which is brilliant. So well done to you. Okay, that's great. Now, on to strategy number 4. So I referenced this before. Look for the easy wins to get started. You know, it doesn't have to be everything all at once. It doesn't have to be this massive program at work. It could be if you want it to be, but my advice to you is to look for a starting point and to start for something small, learn some lessons, and watch, read, attend more webinars, talk to people, get your plan together on the basis of that research. So one of the ideas that I'd like to put forward today is that a great starting point for you is API integrations, because they're out there. Yeah, that's just really a choice of who you're working with and whether they have API or not. And that's as simple as you saying to your CRM provider, your practice management software, or to some of your other providers, hey, do you do API? If you do, as an example, I want to API in with Arken, or I want to API in with this data and analytics package, or hey, who's in your ecosystem? Now, I can tell you this, practice management CRM providers will API in with organizations, because there is some work involved and, you know, everyone's busy, to the clients that demand it most, right? So when we go and have conversations with these organizations, and you know, we're currently holding conversations with multiple different firms at all sorts of different stages of discussion, typically it's about, well, okay, that's great, David, looks like a fantastic idea. Who are your customers? Who do you work with that we work with that need to API in? So you can get that done really quickly, and you know what, it doesn't actually cost you much money, in fact nothing at all if you want a simplistic approach, and then you can kind of build from there. Okay, online Wills, great way to start. I referenced that before. I think that if you're to learn anything about the digitization journey, then online Wills is a great starting point for you. And look, one of the ones that I haven't referenced is social campaigns, and I say that because there's lots of tools, lots of componentry that you can use. It's really advanced, and it's really industry agnostic. So you can take these tools and componentry and weave them into a social campaign, and you know, it's a low cost, find your way kind of alternative. If you wanted to focus on, say, customer acquisition as the first step, then social campaigns are a really good way to go. You know, if you don't have those smarts in house, then you can find them. There's lots of digital agencies around that are really, really good at this stuff. So great starting point. But overall, start small, watch and learn, and make a plan. Now, strategy number 5. This won't surprise you, but let me explain why I'm suggesting that you work with suppliers who can deliver the technology step up you need. It is quite simple, so you don't have to pay for it yourself. So that you can work with them in partnership, where you're sharing information, you might be working under an NDA perhaps, but you're really telling them about what it is you're trying to achieve. Because once they know that, they can really try and help you, and they'll take that information and build that into their product roadmap, in the collective customer feedback, and they'll start delivering solutions to your problems. And in a SaaS world, that might be a product-based solution, which everybody shares in, rather than a unique situation for yourself. But look, expect from them that they're really straight up with you in return. So if you're not getting that, then you need to question. So when I say look for a provider to give you the technology step up, they are the reasons. Now, one of the tests is, do they offer API integrations? I won't belabor that point because we have covered it before, but it's a good example of this digitization framework which you can then leverage off. So if you're working on sort of server-based products, then the problem with that is you may well get stuck with that product and not be where you need to be in 3 years, because a digitization journey can take sort of 2 to 3 years depending on how advanced you are. So think about this: where will you be in 3 years' time? So if you don't start, where is the industry going to be in 3 years' time? So when you look at something like API integration, it's a great starting point, and you can really start to work with your provider on that, because they've got that ecosystem. Everything's in place. Are they secure? Now, look, we live in a world where, unfortunately, there's hackers and there's cybercrime and all sorts of things. So here's the key thing with SaaS businesses in particular, is that they are the most secure business that you have, by comparison with your server and your server cover, right? That's my opinion. Reason for that is that if you look at Microsoft and Amazon, they are entrusted with data from very large organizations all around the world, including governments, and they must protect that. So do have a look at what your organization is doing with your data. How secure are they? And look, are they doing stuff with artificial intelligence, or are they at least researching it? What can they do to tell you about artificial intelligence and how that may work? I'm sure a lot of organizations are talking about it, but what's their time frame? What does their product roadmap look like? And similarly with blockchain, are they looking at that? Maybe there's an application they can sit on top of a blockchain, which is really, really appropriate to meet the challenges of your business. Do they actually solve the problems that you've got? Because if they don't, then you must sit back and wonder why you're with them, because the pace of change in technology is just so intense now. And the faster it goes, the quicker it gets. So it's really important for you that the technology provider that you have today is actually delivering solutions to the problems which you have. Talked about API again. I'll just reference: do they have an ecosystem? Are they specialist providers? And do they have thought leadership? So why is that in there? It's my belief, it's the belief of Arken.legal, and the reason that we do these webinars, as an example, is because we have a role to play as a leader in the industry to help educate the industry. And if your provider is not doing that, then ask them why, because they've got a lot of information, they've got a lot of IP, and they could help you with your journey. They could help others in your community with their journeys. So that's the 5 strategies. Let's go for the big wrap up and talk about all of these different things and try to bring them home for you so that you've got some takeaways in addition to the strategies. So digitization in the wills and probate industry is really going to intensify. In terms of timeframes, if you're asking those questions, my belief is that over the next 1 to 3 years, we're really going to start to see this stuff ramp up. Why? Because if we're starting to see blockchain applications, artificial intelligence used elsewhere to the level that it is only natural that it will start to intensify and will start to be used within the wills and probate industry. So we will see some disruption and some outcomes from that. So the technologies really are what's going to drive that. As I say, they're just going to become more commonplace and widely adopted. Now, we've talked a lot about risk and cybercrime and things like this. The key thing is to look at digitization as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to really find efficiencies in your business. It's an opportunity to grow your business. It's an opportunity to grow customer loyalty. So the great thing about digitization is that it can be 360 degrees of possibilities, and it can be what you make it. So you can get the outcomes that you're looking for. And there are significant opportunities for you within the wills and probate industry to harness. Now, AI and blockchain really, as 2 blockbuster technologies, are, I think, going to have a significant impact in the industry. Now, obviously it takes somebody to come in and say, right, I'm going to spend all this money building a blockchain solution. But it's not beyond the realms of reason, because we're starting to see the industry heating up, particularly in the technology space, people are starting to become aware of the fact that 50% of the world population doesn't have a will, they're starting to look at that and go, wow, that's a business opportunity, right? So it's not beyond the realms of reason that somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm going to build a AI smart blockchain enabled will. And that could be quite disruptive. Now, will it change and disrupt the industry to the extent that we're not around? No, I don't think so. But the message for me, which I hope I'm putting through clearly, is that we've got to take notice of these things. We've got to be aware of them, and we've got to start to think about how we might apply this and what impacts they might have within our business. So moving on, if we think about some of the strategies, we've got to think about things from the customer perspective first. So in all of these discussions, you go into a room and as I say, good ideas get strangled to death in committees. So you can just lose sight of the customer. And my advice to you is that you work from the customer experience first, and you also keep the customer in mind as you start to build your processes. Start small, but make sure you start. And again, I come back to the point that if you're not going to start now because you don't believe, and that's completely obviously your perspective and decision, then at least just sit down and think about where the industry is going to be in 3 years and where you will be as against the industry in 3 years, because a digital journey will take that period of time. Look for the easy win start. Great rule, I think. So, and they are there, API and online wills are great starts. Look, be honest about your business and how you manage the change, because you can make these things better than Texas, or you can get a plan together and start logically working your way through it so that you are underway and that you're starting to learn and starting to change your culture. You're starting to prove the doubt is wrong. You're starting to get some wins on the board and see some ROI. As I mentioned, API and online wills are a great starting point. And look, trust is a key word. All around technology, I think, you've just got to have trust and honesty. They're key words. Find a partner you trust. Find somebody who's going to be really honest with you. So that's the summaries. Now, some of you may not be aware of Arken.legal. I'm just going to quickly whip you through it in a couple of slides, and we're going to answer some questions which I think have come in. So some of you might have been aware of a former name, which was DPL Professional. So DPL was started 25 years ago and actually pioneered online wills in the UK, and really has the leading will drafting product in the market. Today, we're really all about helping the industry transform through digital technology. So our core product, Arken, creates simple and complex wills and other estate planning documents, so LPAs and things like that, in real time based on an intelligent questionnaire. And ultimately, the outcome of that with that one product is that it saves time. If you're a solicitor's firm in particular and concerned about risk, or any firm who needs to be worried about risk, then it lowers that risk for you. It definitely provides consistency. If you're a will writer, or if you've got multiple offices, or even if you've just got multiple staff at different levels, then you need to have consistency. Again, looking at it from a customer experience, what is the consistency that you can provide in terms of the precedents and in terms of managing your risks? And so Arken will do that. And it does enable you to really focus on high-level tasks, because, hey, it automates documents, so it creates time. Now, I'm just going to show you something really quickly by turning on my laser pointer here. This is the questionnaire. Now, if you answered yes in that section there, it would open up a whole raft of other questions. So don't be fooled by the simple kind of tab base down there. And in real time, this will is actually drafted. So every time you answer a question, it drafts the document here. So makes it very, very fast to draft a will. In fact, it's probably, it is in fact half the time to draft a will. Okay, last thing on Arken. So this is our product roadmap. Now you can see in the middle here, I don't know if you can see my mouse button, but we've got Arken document generation. That is the core of what we do. And around the edges of it, you can see API integration, digital wills and services, and efficiency enablement. They are the core components of the products that we're releasing over the next 6 to 12 months, and will be from there on out to really help our clients and the industry overall. So I always finish with a quote. Last time we did the webinar, for those of you that were in the first webinar that I ran, I had a Winston Churchill quote. So This isn't Winston Churchill, but look, I love the quote. It's no longer the big beating the small, but the fast beating the slow, and that is Eric Pearson, who's the CIO at a large hotel group. Really interesting quote, isn't it, when you're talking about digitization? So you're kind of disrupting things there. You know, it's always been the big who will beat the small, but what digitization does is it enables smaller organizations to grab market share through disruption. So tend to believe him on that one. And of course, we've got to finish on a great Brit. So Charles Darwin, it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change. I thought that was highly relevant considering what we have been talking about. Quick plug for the next webinar. So that's the changing buying habits of the generations in wills and estate planning. People have been talking to us about that. Look, we're going to put out a survey. So in that survey that you'll get within the next 24 hours, it asks you what other stuff you'd like to cover. So if you've got specific things you'd like us to talk about, then to the best of our ability, we will do that. So that's the next webinar. Now, we've got some questions. So my lovely assistant Pippa is going to ask those. So fire away, Pippa, what have we got?
Yeah, one of the main questions, actually, we've had a couple of people ask this, is how do we actually go about assessing potential partners to understand if they are secure and are to be trusted?
Yeah, look, that's a good question. Every organisation will have its own matrix, so you'll have different things which are important to you and different problems that you want to solve for your organisation as opposed to another organisation. So there's some things that you probably want to build into that matrix. You know, security is certainly one, so how secure are they? Some of the things we've been talking about today, I would say that really if you're thinking about changing partners, then you really need to start thinking about API architecture and ecosystems, because that's the way that things work in other industries, and it's very much the direction. I'd ask them what they can do to help you with your digitization journey. Fundamentally, I think you need to feel as though you can trust them, so there needs to be that one-to-one relationship as well. Look for accreditation. I think that's a good one. You know, if somebody's gone through and been evaluated independently, then that's a pretty good sign that they're good at what they do. Hopefully that helps. Anything else for that?
Yeah, and just another comment related to that. If they feel uncomfortable about sharing private goals of the organisation with these partners, what should they do to protect themselves there?
Yeah, look, I think an NDA is the best way to do it, but I would tend to do it in stages as well. You know, as a technology partner, we don't expect organisations to lay everything in front of us at the first visit, but a good technology partner should uncover that anyway through their discovery processes and asking information. But I think you know, if you were to get a brief together of the broad high-level things that you're trying to address, maybe put that in front of a range of different partners and get their commentary or proposal on that. That's always a good step forward.
Yeah, another question is about, although we've got a lot of people here today who really want to embrace technology, there is a lot of disbelievers within their firms. How do they go about trying to convert the disbeliever?
Yeah, look, that's a tough one, isn't it? And yeah, you know, if you look at this, you're probably going to come smack up against some cultural aspects of this. So within a law firm, you're probably going to run into those people who have been there for a while, and their business or the practices are running along very well, thank you very much. They may even be the biggest billers, and they see no need to change. My suggestion there or in other areas is do your research. You know, look at things that are from white papers from known bodies. You know, the Government for the Office of Science is a good white paper. Please just sing out if you want that. I can send it to you. It's a great read. I'd definitely do that. I'd start with a small operation first, and so prove the ROI, because there's nothing like runs on the board. I'd certainly do the opposite to dealing with the disbelievers head on. I'd gather together the believers and play the numbers, and start to work through a program of work and to prove why this is needed. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, another question is, what can Arken integrate with?
Yeah, okay, good question. So look, Arken this week is releasing its API architecture. So we are in advanced discussions with a range of different API partners. And that's really exciting for us because we personally, we need to do this. And there's all sorts of opportunities which are going to provide lots of opportunities for our customers in the different groups. So accountants, lawyers, and will writers. Let's take will writers for an example, because I know a few of you are on the call. You may find that you've got the need for a CRM, and you might currently have a package which has CRM integrated with it as a part of it and might have a few bells and whistles on it and things. You might choose to go with a more specialized product, and that's what we're aiming to do for will writers, is to provide an API integration with a specialized CRM provider, which can give you a lot more than the basics.
We just got a comment in from one of the viewers here that said, from experience, the proof to the firm non-believers is to show a POV. These tend to be free. Yeah,
look, I guess so. And look, that'll be different for every organisation. Yeah, I think if you've got something that's well researched and hard to argue with, then that's certainly a good approach. Absolutely.
That's it for questions. So.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody, for attending. Ka kite, that's goodbye in Te Reo in Māori, which is New Zealand. Thank you so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Goodbye.